It's his country, and he is a dictator. End of story. He doesn't have to be right. He can throw you in the brig for anything he wants. You have your hair parted on the wrong side. Now, if I'm floating out there on the ocean in my boat, and I find another boat, and there's nobody on the boat, who owns it?
The captain.
The captain. This is called, what is this called?
Salvage rights.
Salvage rights. Thank you. It's another senior moment. Okay? It's salvage rights. Finders, keepers. I found it, nobody else claimed it, it's mine. End of story. Is that the way we do things on land? No. This is the law of the sea. What is the Constitution? The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, based on property. Common law and admiralty law are supposed to stay apart, just like land and water. Admiralty law is allowed to come up on land as far as the high water mark, originally. Because what is the ocean used for? Do you live there? Heck no. All you use it for is just transporting and shipping goods back and forth. It's used for commerce. So anybody who had a ship out on the ocean, you were selling stuff or taking it somewhere to be sold. Now, when we had the United States is different. We've got the Great Lakes. England doesn't have any Great Lakes. We've got all these rivers that England doesn't have. You can send your ships up and down these rivers inland. Well, gosh, that doesn't make any sense anymore. We can't say law of the sea, so now it is really the law of commerce. It's not so much where you are doing it, as what you are doing. So you've got three bodies of law that the Supreme Court can adjudicate. Common law, equity law, and admiralty law. And they're different. Right? Now, are those the only bodies of law? No. Those are the only ones that the Constitution acknowledges. So we can have, these are constitutional laws. Anything that is specified by the Constitution is constitutional. Anything which is prohibited by the Constitution is unconstitutional. What if something is not specified but not prohibited by the Constitution? What do we call that?
Administrative.
It's extra-constitutional. It's outside the constitutional, but it's not forbidden. One of your rights is the right to contract. You have an unlimited right to contract. Now, if I say, I will pay you $200 to paint the house my dog sleeps in, you go, wow, it's a great deal. I mean, how big is the biggest dog house you've ever seen? You know, about yay big? 200 bucks? Yeah, I can do that in a couple hours. Yeah, I'll do that. You sign the contract. And I walk you around the corner and I show you this, 3-story mansion. 27 rooms. They go, well, this is the house my dog sleeps in. Guess what? You're in deep trouble. Because you've got to paint that house for 200 bucks. Was that a good contract? No. Is your right to contract unlimited? Yes. That's why they say read the contract. They're not kidding. Now, that's common law, admiralty, and due process. Like I said, you have a right to common law process. The only time they can move it down is if the distinction of property is not clearly defined. Now, if we move to page 16, okay, Marbury versus Madison is a Supreme Court decision. It is a very important Supreme Court decision. Good and bad. Okay? The good news is that the decision of Marbury versus Madison in 1803 says, certainly all those who have framed written constitutions contemplate them as forming the fundamental and paramount law of the nation. And consequently, the theory of every such government must be that an act of the legislature repugnant to the Constitution is void. If it's unconstitutional, it was never a law to start with. That's the good news. The bad news is up above that. It says the critical importance of Marbury is the assumption of several powers by the Supreme Court. The assumption of powers. They assume that we can do this. Prior to Marbury versus Madison, who decided what is and is not constitutional? Well, the question never came up. It's not listed in the Constitution. Article 3 is very short. It just says that there is a Supreme Court. It doesn't say what they can or cannot do. And so John Marshall said, well, we're the Supreme Court. We are going to decide what is or is not constitutional. Okay, everybody just kind of went along with them. They didn't have a better idea. So now, let's pretend, just for a minute, that the Supreme Court decides that the First Amendment does not give you a personal right to freedom of religion. You only have freedom of religion if you are Catholic, Protestant, or Jewish. Is that right? The Supreme Court said so. Does that make it the way things are? No! You have to remember, the Constitution says what the Supreme Court is. The Supreme Court does not get to say what the Constitution is. That would be circular logic. Who decides what is or is not constitutional? We the people. Who created this thing in the first place? If we decide the Supreme Court is out to lunch, it's up to us to correct it. There's no formal way to do that, but we can amend or abolish the Constitution anytime we see fit. Well, let's rewrite Article 3. So, I've just gone over constitutional, unconstitutional, and extra-constitutional. Extra-constitutional is not specified nor prohibited by the Constitution. It is basically just in addition to. Now, there are some ideas that came about because of all this shipping. You're in England and you ship all your stuff to North America, and all the people buy it and pay you in gold, which is the only thing they would pay you with. And your boat is coming back to the United States, or to England from the United States, with all this gold. What happens if the boat sinks?
Salvage rights.
Well, yeah, salvage rights. Anybody who can get the gold, it's yours. It's laying right down there where the Titanic is going to be. That gold is lost forever and ever and ever and ever, for all intents and purposes. So what they did was they set up insurance companies where you had limited liability. You have several shipping companies, and if my boat sinks, the other shipping companies are going to help me pay for it, so that I don't lose everything that I had with that one boat. Now, the bad news is that if one of their boats sinks, I've got to chip in money to help pay for theirs. That's limited liability. Now, in order to have that, you have to have a contract. And only under contract can you compel